right, so now to start kind of practicing this, we're going to turn to the Lord of the Rings project and just to kind of look through how we can understand our graphs and how we can use this to make statements and hypotheses about text. Okay, so again, this is something that we did do before spring break, so I'm not going to take much time here, but I'm just going to walk you through 3 of the graphs within this huge project just to kind of articulate this process of identifying what's being graphed, what our data is, and how we might imagine hypotheses from these graphs. Okay, so we're going to look at the common words graph, the sentiment analysis graph, and the appearance of new words graph. Okay, so this may be our best bet for webcam positioning. So here's our common words graph. And so our first question, right, is what are we looking at, right? What is being graphed? What's our data? What are we seeing here? And then, of course, we want to try to get to what kinds of hypotheses can we make about this graphed data, right? So the first thing is, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at what's basically a word cloud, right? We are looking at frequency of words, so how often they're repeated throughout the text, where the more often a word appears, the bigger it is in its particular box relative to the others. And then we can see that in this particular case, these have been mapped by book, right? So we have our frequency of words in The Hobbit, frequency in The Fellowship, frequency in Two Towers, and frequency in Return of the King. And each of these are then contained by this nice dashed box. So in class, some things that you all notice looking at this particular graph is first how many names we see here. Again, indicated by capital letters, right? So we've got Bilbo, Frodo, Frodo appears a lot. We've got Sam, who appears a couple times, Gollum, Gandalf, Aragorn shows up a couple times, Pippin, Merry, and this is looking across all 4 of these books, right? And these are our capital letter names, right? So this is kind of telling us, I think rightly so, that these are probably our major characters, right? Again, we want to keep in mind that it could be they begin sentences, it could be places, right? But probably we can assume that these are proper names for something, not just words that constantly begin sentences. And then we might head to the text itself, right? Because this is a combination practice. And we might say like, okay, what is Bilbo? What is Frodo? What is Sam? What is Gandalf? And so on. And that might lead us to confirming that hypothesis that these were characters, right? And that these were the main characters. And we can assume that they are main because they're repeated multiple times, right? Because they appear so much throughout the text. Okay, another thing that we might notice, and that I believe you all articulated in class, is the frequency of words having to do with movement, right? So words like come, went, came, away, long, right? So many of these words have to do with movement and travel. And so from here, we might imagine that this is a book about travel. It's a book about a quest. It's a book where moving and crossing distances, right, is core to its storytelling, right? And of course, The Lord of the Rings is an epic quest story, right? So that's not surprising. Okay, so another thing that we might look at is the presence of light versus dark, right? So in The Hobbit, we see dark right here, yeah? But we don't see light in this particular book, right? Compare that to The Fellowship of the Ring, where we have light present here, and dark, again, is here, right? And now Two Towers, we have dark, and light is gone. Finally, Return of the King. Again, we simply have dark. We have no presence of light. So some things that we could talk about here, right? Of course, light and dark can mean multiple things, right? But these are also choices that J.R. Tolkien has made in writing his text. So we are within our rights to read into this particular presence. And we might say something like, even though this is a heroic story, right? And even though this is a story where good wins and good triumphs over evil and so on, it's actually a really dark story, right? This is not a happy story. This is not like your Marvel Comics kind of like bubblegum pop type of story, right? This is like a dark, scary, deeply engaging, kind of perhaps even troubling text, right? And we can see that by mapping this changes of dark versus light within these 4 books, right? Just as kind of a frequency of the word. Okay, so sentiment analysis takes us to this graph. So sentiment analysis is kind of cool, and it has to do with, based in linguistic study, the ways that certain words that we use carry a mood, right? And this, we can kind of sense this a little bit with words like good and bad, light and dark, as I just demonstrated, but we can also think about it with different words, like different verbs for the same action. So take just a second and think about the difference between the following words, which all mean laugh, right? So we could say cackle, we could say giggle, we could say chuckle, right? So each of these words, you probably have a sense of who cackles versus who giggles versus who chuckles, right? They all carry slightly different moods, a slightly different sense of what this particular type of laughter means, even though it's all the same action, which is laughing. Okay, so in these graphs map that kind of difference, right? So the frequency of negative sentiment words versus positive sentiment words, and then neutral ones. And we can see from their description at the top that green, yellow, and red indicate positive, neutral, negative, respectively. So from here, you're probably immediately noticing that the Hobbit and the Silmarillion are really red compared to the other three, which are a little bit more green, yellow, and orange with these, individual bands of red. And from here, we might imagine, again, that perhaps this is a scary story. Maybe The Hobbit is a scary, adventurous, fast-paced, stressful kind of text compared to the other three. We might point to these particular moments of red bands, like these down here in Return of the King, as moments where there's maybe a battle or some like big tragic moment happens in the plot, or anything else, right? So again, this would be something where we might say, oh, what's this happening at the end of the Two Towers? And we might go to the book and read whatever's happening at this particular point that could be leading to this kind of sentiment. All right, and then finally, the appearance of new words graph is, I'm just pointing it out here because this is actually a really good one that helps us think about, when we look at our data, what's actually significant about it in our graphs, right? So the appearance of new words is graphing the percentage of new words on any given page in a text, right? And this is new words to the book itself. And as it says at the top, if 25% or more new words on a page are there, then the block is red. And if it's less than that, then there's shades from pink to blue, right? And purpley in the middle. So when we're looking at this, right, what that basically means is that the redder the box, the newer the words, right? And the bluer the box, the fewer new words, right? So words we've seen before within the text. So if we look at these graphs, right, we'll notice probably immediately that there's lots of red at the front half of the books and lots of blue near the back half. And this, of course, is not surprising because when we open a book, every word is new because it's the beginning, right? So what we want to look for instead are the outliers, right? Places where we would not expect to see lots of new words appearing or lots of non-new words appearing, right? So what is happening right here at the Silmarillion where there are no new words, but it's apparently the first page, right? Right here. Or what is happening down here in the Fellowship where we've got this little single red block amidst a sea of blue, right? What is maybe happening at that point in the text that we're suddenly getting a lot of new words, right? And thinking about the way that stories go, this could be a new place. Perhaps we've met a new set of characters. Perhaps we are in a new situation, right? A massive, again, like a big plot point that's happening, and so on, right? So that's kind of what we want to look for in this particular one. And the reason, again, that I've chosen to focus on this graph is because this actually does a really good job of showing us the ways that we need to be critical in reading what the data we're presented with is versus what is interesting, right? And again, in this case, it's not surprising that it's all red at the beginning. It's surprising when it's red in other places, right? And that's the stuff we want to look at. So here, but of course you wouldn't know that if you didn't know how to understand this graph, right? And if you weren't critically reading your graph. Okay, so that's actually going to wrap up this particular video. I'm going to make a second video which walks you through the Voyant Tools suite to help, which is what you'll be using for your distant reading report. In the meantime, you will see a small assignment that's just practicing making hypotheses from distant reading graphs. Okay, so I'm going to post a few graphs, and I'd like you to post to the discussion board with some ideas of what you might be able to read from those graphs just to get some practice before working in this particular tool and for this particular major assignment. And you can look for this Voyant Tools tutorial later today.